The morning sunlight streamed through the tall windows of Philip's apartment as he practiced at his grand piano. His fingers danced across the keys with the effortless precision that came from 30 years of dedication. At 52, Philip Reyes was considered one of the world's finest classical pianists. His recordings of Chopin and Rachmaninoff had earned him awards, and his concerts sold out months in advance. But today, his playing lacked its usual fire. He stopped mid-phrase, sighing as he rubbed his tired eyes. "What's wrong with me?" he muttered to himself. The truth was, Philip was exhausted. He had just returned from a grueling 6-month tour across 3 continents, 28 cities, countless hotel rooms, and the same pieces performed night after night. The magic he once felt when playing these masterpieces had dulled, replaced by a mechanical routine that left him feeling empty. His phone buzzed with a message from his manager. "Don't forget, Vienna Piano Festival in 3 weeks. Program needs to be finalized today. The Vienna International Piano Festival." It was one of the most prestigious events in the classical music world, and Philip had been a regular performer for the past decade. Usually he looked forward to it: the historic concert halls, the appreciative audiences, the company of fellow musicians who understood the joys and struggles of life as a classical performer. But this year, the thought of preparing another traditional program filled him with a strange restlessness. He wanted something different, something that would reignite his passion for the piano and surprise the sometimes stuffy classical music establishment. Philip closed the piano lid and walked to the kitchen to make coffee. As the machine gurgled and hissed, he absent-mindedly flipped through a magazine someone had left on his counter. It was a technology publication, not his usual reading material, opened to an article about recent advances in artificial intelligence. The headline caught his eye: Mira 7, the robot that can learn almost anything. The article described a new robot developed by a Japanese technology company. Unlike previous mechanical marvels that could perform only specialized tasks, Mira 7 used advanced learning algorithms to master complex skills by observing humans. It had already been taught to cook, fold origami, and even paint in the style of famous artists. A photograph showed the robot, a sleek, humanoid figure with metallic limbs and an expressionless face, sitting at a potter's wheel, crafting a ceramic bowl with surprising dexterity. Philip almost spilled his coffee when he reached the final paragraph. The team behind Mira 7 is currently teaching it to play piano. Early results suggest it can already perform simple pieces with technical accuracy, though critics question whether a machine could ever capture the emotional nuance that makes music truly moving. An idea began to form in Philip's mind, an idea so outlandish that he laughed out loud at the thought of it. What if he included a robot pianist in his Vienna program, not as a serious musical endeavor, but as a light-hearted interlude that might shake up the sometimes too serious world of classical music? "That's ridiculous," he told himself, still smiling at the absurdity of it. Mrs. Kowalski would have a heart attack. Mrs. Kowalski was the stern, tradition-bound director of the Vienna Festival, who insisted on maintaining the highest standards of classical performance. The thought of her reaction to a robot pianist made Philip chuckle even harder, but the idea wouldn't leave him. He found himself researching Mira 7 online, discovering that the robot and its creators would be attending a technology exhibition in Vienna that coincided with the music festival. It seemed like fate. Before he could talk himself out of it, Philip called his manager. "Greg, I've decided on my program for Vienna," he said, trying to keep his voice casual. "Thank goodness," Greg replied. "What will it be?" "The Beethoven sonatas, or perhaps the Chopin preludes again. They always go over well." "Actually," Philip said, "I'm thinking of Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 3. "Excellent choice. It's challenging, but you play it beautifully." "With a twist," Philip added, unable to keep the mischief from his voice. "What kind of twist?" Greg asked, suspicion creeping into his tone. He'd worked with Philip long enough to recognize when his client was plotting something unusual. "I want to perform the first movement myself, and then I want to have a robot perform the same piece." The silence on the other end of the line stretched for so long that Philip wondered if the call had dropped. "Greg? Are you still there? Please tell me you're joking," Greg finally said. Philip explained his idea, how he'd read about Mira 7, how the robot would be in Vienna at the same time as the festival, how bringing technology into the classical concert hall might attract new audiences and create a buzz around the performance. It would be a light-hearted experiment, Philip insisted, a way to show that while machines might achieve technical proficiency, true artistry requires human emotion and understanding. Mrs. Kowalski will never approve this, Greg warned. Let me worry about Mrs. Kowalski, Philip said, feeling more energized than he had in months. Just get me in touch with the Mira 7 team. 3 days later, Philip was on a video call with Dr. Hiroshi Tanaka, the lead engineer for the Mira 7 project. The scientist listened politely as Philip explained his idea, his expression unreadable. So you see, Philip concluded, it would be an interesting cultural experiment, a chance to demonstrate Mira 7's capabilities to a new audience, while also exploring the boundaries between technological skill and human artistry. Dr. Tanaka adjusted his glasses thoughtfully. Mr. Reyes, I must confess I'm surprised by your proposal. Most classical musicians I've encountered have been resistant to the idea of robots performing their art. I'm not suggesting Mira 7 could replace a human pianist, Philip clarified quickly. Quite the opposite. I expect the performance will highlight the limitations of even the most advanced technology when it comes to artistic expression. A small smile appeared on Dr. Tanaka's face. Perhaps, or perhaps you will be surprised. Either way, it sounds like a fascinating experiment. However, there is one significant challenge. Rachmaninoff's third piano concerto is extremely complex. Mira 7 has only mastered simple pieces so far. How long would it take to teach it the concerto? Dr. Tanaka considered this. With accelerated learning protocols and your guidance, 3 weeks might be possible. It would be pushing the limits of our current capabilities, but that makes it all the more interesting from a research perspective. Then you'll do it? Philip asked, trying not to sound too eager. Yes, I believe we will. On one condition, you must work directly with us to help train Mira 7. Your expertise would be invaluable to the learning process. Philip agreed immediately. The prospect of teaching a robot to play Rachmaninoff seemed bizarre, yet strangely exhilarating. It was exactly the kind of challenge he needed to break out of his creative rut. The next call to Mrs. Kowalski was considerably less pleasant. As expected, the festival director was appalled by the suggestion. Absolutely not, she declared. The Vienna International Piano Festival has a reputation for excellence and tradition. We showcase the world's finest pianists, not machines. It's one performance, Helena, Philip said, using her first name to remind her of their long association. And it's not replacing a human performer. It's in addition to my regular program. Think of it as an educational demonstration. The board would never approve such a thing. The board might be interested in the publicity it would generate, Philip countered, and the new audiences it might attract. Classical music needs young people in the concert halls, Helena. When was the last time you saw anyone under 30 at the festival? That struck a nerve. Mrs. Kowalski was silent for a moment. Send me a formal proposal, she finally said. I make no promises, but I will present it to the board. Philip hung up the phone feeling like he'd won a small victory. He knew Mrs. Kowalski well enough to recognize when her resistance was weakening. That evening, as he sat at his piano working on the Rachmaninoff concerto, Philip felt a spark of excitement he hadn't experienced in years. The piece, which he had performed dozens of times before, suddenly seemed fresh again as he considered how he would teach its complexities to a machine. Would Mira 7 be able to handle the technical demands? Almost certainly. But what about the emotional depths of the piece? The subtle variations in tempo and dynamics that weren't marked in the score but came from a performer's intuitive understanding of the music? These were the questions that occupied Philip's mind as he played late into the night, rediscovering his love for a piece he thought had no more secrets to reveal. 2 weeks later, Philip boarded a plane to Vienna, his suitcase packed with scores and recordings. The festival board had approved his unusual program, though not without significant debate. Mrs. Kowalski had called to inform him that he would be solely responsible for any embarrassment this stunt might cause. But Philip wasn't worried about embarrassment. As the plane took off, he looked out the window at the clouds below, feeling more alive and purposeful than he had in years. Whatever happened in Vienna, whether Mira 7 impressed or disappointed, he had already achieved something important. He had broken free from routine and embraced the unknown. The famous pianist smiled to himself as he imagined the faces of the audience when a robot took the stage in one of classical music's most hallowed venues. It would be an experience none of them would forget. And in a world where classical concerts often blended together in predictable patterns, that alone made it worthwhile. The idea came to Philip during breakfast. As he spread jam on his toast, he watched a news segment about the latest advancements in artificial intelligence. A robot called Mira 7 caught his attention. Supposedly, it could learn and perform complex tasks with remarkable precision. What really grabbed him was when the reporter mentioned that Mira 7 had been programmed to play piano. Philip nearly choked on his toast. He had been performing classical piano for over 30 years, touring the world's most prestigious venues and earning accolades that filled an entire wall in his home studio. The thought of a machine playing piano struck him as both amusing and slightly absurd. Music wasn't just about hitting the right keys at the right time. It was about feeling, interpretation, the subtle ways emotion translated through fingertips. "That's it," he muttered to himself, setting down his coffee cup. The International Piano Festival in Vienna was just 2 weeks away, and he'd been searching for something to make his performance stand out. What if he incorporated this robot pianist as a light-hearted interlude? It would be perfect. A way to break the stuffiness that sometimes plagued these events while also making a point about the irreplaceable human element in art. 3 days later, Philip found himself at the Vienna Technology Exhibition, which by lucky coincidence was happening in a convention center right next to the concert hall, where he would be performing. He navigated through crowds of tech enthusiasts until he spotted what he was looking for. A sleek, humanoid robot seated at a baby grand piano, surrounded by curious onlookers. The robot's creators, a team from a Japanese tech company, were explaining Mira 7's capabilities to the audience. The robot can analyze any piece of music and reproduce it with perfect technical execution, explained Dr. Tanaka, the lead engineer. It uses advanced algorithms to understand musical structure and can play anything from simple melodies to the most complex classical compositions. Philip listened, one eyebrow raised in skepticism. When the small crowd dispersed, he approached Dr. Tanaka. "I'm Philip Reyes," he introduced himself. "I'm performing at the piano festival next week." Dr. Tanaka's eyes widened in recognition. "Mr. Reyes, your recording of Chopin's ballads is magnificent. What brings you to our humble exhibition?" "Your robot pianist," Philip replied with a smile. "I have a proposition that might interest you." An hour and several cups of coffee later, a plan was hatched. Dr. Tanaka and his team were thrilled at the opportunity to showcase their creation at the prestigious festival. Philip's idea was simple. He would challenge Mira 7 to perform Rachmaninoff's notoriously difficult Piano Concerto No. 3, a piece that even accomplished human pianists approached with caution. The next morning, at the pre-festival press conference, a room full of music journalists watched as Philip made his announcement. "For this year's performance, I've decided to include a special guest," he said, a mischievous glint in his eye. "I've invited Mira 7, the piano-playing robot from the technology exhibition, to join me on stage." Murmurs rippled through the room, followed by a few chuckles. One journalist raised her hand. "Is this a joke, Mr. Reyes?" "Not at all," Philip replied. "Though I admit there's an element of fun here. I've challenged Mira 7 to perform Rachmaninoff's Third Piano Concerto. I think it will be both entertaining and educational for all of us to see what current technology can achieve in the realm of musical performance." The journalists erupted with questions. Was he serious? Was this a publicity stunt? Wasn't he worried about being upstaged by a machine? Philip answered each question with good humor. "Look, I've been playing piano since I was 4 years old. I've devoted my life to this art form. I'm not threatened by a robot, I'm curious. Aren't you? Besides, there's more to music than just hitting the right notes in the right order. That's what I want to demonstrate." By that afternoon, the story had spread through social media and music blogs. "Famous pianist challenges robot to piano duel," read one headline. "Man versus machine, the ultimate concert," declared another. Tickets for the festival, which had been selling steadily, suddenly sold out completely. The organizers had to arrange for overflow seating and a live video feed in the plaza outside the concert hall. Not everyone was amused. The festival director, Mrs. Kowalski, called Philip into her office the next day. "What exactly are you trying to do?" she asked, her tone sharp with concern. The International Piano Festival has a reputation for excellence and tradition. This isn't some circus act. Philip leaned back in his chair. That's exactly the problem, isn't it? We've become so wrapped up in tradition that we've forgotten music should also be joyful, surprising, even occasionally silly. This performance will get people talking about classical music in a new way. Mrs. Kowalski frowned, tapping her pen against her desk. And if this robot makes a mockery of Rachmaninoff, then we all learn something about the limitations of artificial intelligence, Philip replied. But what if it doesn't? What if it plays perfectly? Wouldn't that also teach us something important? After much debate, Mrs. Kowalski reluctantly agreed to allow the performance, but with conditions. The robot's segment would be clearly marked in the program as an experimental interlude, not part of the official competition. And if technical problems arose, Philip would need to be ready to step in and salvage the evening. Meanwhile, the news had reached the classical music community, splitting opinions down the middle. Traditionalists were outraged, seeing it as a gimmick that cheapened their beloved art form. Younger musicians and tech enthusiasts were intrigued, eager to witness this unusual cultural crossover. Philip's fellow pianists had mixed reactions. Some teased him good-naturedly. Others expressed concern about setting a precedent. His old teacher from the conservatory called him directly. "Have you lost your mind?" the elderly professor demanded. "What point are you trying to make?" Philip had to think about this for a moment. "I guess I'm trying to understand what makes music human. Is it the technical execution or something more? I don't know the answer, but I think it's worth exploring." As the day of the performance approached, Philip spent hours with Dr. Tanaka and the engineering team, watching as they programmed and fine-tuned Mira 7 for the upcoming challenge. The robot's metallic fingers moved across the keys with eerie precision, reproducing the complex rhythms and harmonies of Rachmaninoff's masterpiece without hesitation. "Impressive," Philip admitted, circling the robot as it played. "But there's something missing," Dr. Tanaka nodded. "We've programmed it to follow the score exactly, but we've also incorporated an element of learning. Mira 7 has analyzed recordings of the piece by different pianists throughout history, including yours, to develop its interpretation." This caught Philip off guard. "It can interpret music?" "In a way," Dr. Tanaka explained. "It recognizes patterns in how human pianists deviate from the written score, the subtle variations in tempo, dynamics, and emphasis that make each performance unique. It then incorporates these elements into its own playing." Philip wasn't sure how to feel about this. Was interpretation, that most human aspect of musical performance, now also within the reach of machines? The night before the performance, Philip couldn't sleep. He paced his hotel room, questioning his decision. What had started as a lighthearted joke now felt weightier, laden with implications about art, technology, and human creativity. Was he making a profound statement or just creating a spectacle? His phone buzzed with a text message from his daughter. "Dad, whatever happens tomorrow, remember why you love playing in the first place. Can't wait to see the robot's face when you show it how it's really done." Philip smiled, feeling some tension leave his shoulders. His daughter was right. At its heart, this was about the joy of music. Whether played by human hands or mechanical ones, music existed to move people, to create connection and emotion. As dawn broke over Vienna, Philip finally drifted off to sleep, the haunting melodies of Rachmaninoff's concerto swirling through his dreams, sometimes played by his own hands, sometimes by the gleaming fingers of Mira 7. Tomorrow would bring what it would bring. The challenge was set, the stage was prepared, and the world was watching. What began as a pianist's joke was about to become one of the most talked about moments in the history of classical music. The morning sun streamed through the windows of the practice hall as Philip walked in, coffee in hand. He was surprised to find that the robot, Mira 7, was already there, its metallic frame positioned perfectly at the grand piano. Dr. Tanaka and two other engineers huddled around a laptop, speaking in hushed, excited tones. "Good morning," Philip called out, setting his coffee on a nearby table. "You're all here early." Dr. Tanaka looked up with a tired smile. "We've been here since 5 a.m., final adjustments. Mira 7 needed some calibration to adapt to this specific piano." Philip nodded, impressed by their dedication despite himself. He'd expected the robot experiment to be somewhat amateurish, a novelty act rather than a serious artistic endeavor. But watching the team work, he realized they were approaching this challenge with the same intensity he brought to his own performances. "Would you like to hear what we've accomplished so far?" Dr. Tanaka asked. "Sure," Philip replied, settling into a chair. He took a sip of his coffee and gestured for them to proceed. One of the engineers tapped something on the laptop, and Mira 7's posture shifted subtly. Its hands, if you could call them that, poised above the keys. There was a moment of stillness, and then the robot began to play. The first notes of Rachmaninoff's Third Piano Concerto filled the room. Philip had heard this piece countless times, had performed it dozens of times himself, but something about this rendition made him sit up straight. The tempo was perfect, each note crystal clear, the dynamics shifting with surprising sensitivity. Philip set down his coffee, forgotten. He moved closer to the piano, watching Mira 7's movements. The robot's fingers glided across the keys with fluid precision, never missing a note, never faltering even in the most complex passages. "This is remarkable," Philip admitted after several minutes. "The technical execution is flawless." "Thank you," Dr. Tanaka said, beaming with pride. "We've been working on Mira 7's musical capabilities for 3 years now." "But there's something missing," Philip continued, circling the piano. "It's technically perfect, yes, but what?" Dr. Tanaka asked, his smile fading slightly. Philip struggled to articulate what he meant. "It's hard to explain. Music isn't just about hitting the right notes at the right time. It's about feeling, interpretation. The subtle ways we communicate emotion through tiny variations in touch, in timing." Dr. Tanaka nodded thoughtfully. "We've programmed Mira 7 to analyze and reproduce those variations. It has studied recordings of the world's greatest pianists, including yours." "That's just it," Philip said. "It's reproducing, not creating. A true performance is a conversation between the musician and the piece, shaped by everything from the acoustics of the room to what the pianist had for breakfast that morning." The engineers exchanged glances, and one of them whispered something to Dr. Tanaka, who nodded. "We've made some adjustments to allow for more spontaneity," Dr. Tanaka said carefully. "Mira 7 will not simply play the same programmed performance each time. It will respond to its environment in real time." Philip raised an eyebrow, skeptical but intrigued. "We'll see." Over the next several days, Philip split his time between his own rehearsals and observing Mira 7's progress. Despite his initial dismissiveness, he found himself increasingly fascinated by the robot's capabilities. Each time Mira 7 played, there were subtle differences in the performance. Nothing dramatic, but enough to create the impression that it was somehow interpreting the music rather than merely executing it. During one rehearsal, Philip stopped Mira 7 mid-performance. "That passage," he said, pointing to a particular section of the score. "You played it differently this time, why?" Dr. Tanaka consulted with his colleagues, then turned to Philip. "We've implemented a learning algorithm that allows Mira 7 to adjust based on acoustic feedback. The room is more crowded today, which changes the sound. Mira 7 adapted accordingly." Philip shook his head, both impressed and unsettled. "Clever, but it's still just algorithms and calculations, not genuine feeling." "Does that matter?" one of the younger engineers asked. "If the audience can't tell the difference?" The question lingered with Philip long after he left the rehearsal. News of the upcoming Man vs. Machine performance had spread beyond the classical music world. Mainstream news outlets picked up the story, and Philip found himself fielding interview requests from technology programs and science podcasts. Social media buzzed with opinions, memes, and heated debates about the future of art in the age of artificial intelligence. Not all the attention was positive. One evening, Philip received a phone call from Leonid, an old friend and fellow pianist. "Have you lost your mind?" Leonid demanded without preamble. "You're making a mockery of our art form." "It's an experiment, Leonid," Philip replied calmly. "A way to explore what makes music human." "It's a publicity stunt," Leonid countered. "And you're giving credibility to the idea that machines can replace us. Do you know how many music students are struggling to find work already? How many orchestras are cutting budgets? And now you're suggesting that a robot can do what we've spent lifetimes perfecting." Philip sighed. He hadn't considered this perspective. "That's not my intention. Intentions don't matter. Impact does." Leonid's voice softened slightly. "Look, I know you think this is harmless fun, but there are real stakes here. People are already talking about how this could change the future of performance arts. Some are even suggesting that if Mira 7 performs well, it could open the door to robot musicians replacing humans in orchestras. After hanging up, Philip walked to his piano and sat in silence, fingers resting lightly on the keys. Was Leonid right? Was he inadvertently contributing to something harmful? He began to play softly, losing himself in the music as he always did when troubled. The next morning, Philip arrived at the rehearsal hall with new determination. He found Dr. Tanaka making final adjustments to Mira 7. "I want to try something," Philip announced. "A real test," Dr. Tanaka looked up curiously. "What kind of test?" "I'm going to play a passage from the concerto, and I want to see if Mira 7 can respond to it, not just replicate it, but actually engage with what I'm doing musically." The engineers huddled together, speaking rapidly in Japanese. Finally, Dr. Tanaka nodded. "We can try. This isn't exactly what Mira 7 was designed for, but it might be interesting." Philip sat at a second piano that had been brought in for rehearsal purposes. He began to play a section from the middle of the concerto, but with his own dramatic interpretation, slowing certain passages, emphasizing unexpected notes, changing the emotional color of the piece. When he finished, he nodded to Dr. Tanaka. "Now let's see if Mira 7 can respond to that. Not copy it exactly, but engage with the musical ideas I just presented." Dr. Tanaka gave some commands to the robot, and Mira 7 began to play the same section. At first, it seemed to be merely reproducing Philip's performance, but then something unexpected happened. The robot began to develop the musical themes Philip had emphasized, taking them in new directions while maintaining the emotional tone he had established. Philip listened, transfixed. It wasn't just technical mimicry. There was something else happening. Something that, if he hadn't known better, he might have called musical intuition. When Mira 7 finished, the room was silent. That was... Philip trailed off, unsure what to say. "Impressive?" Dr. Tanaka suggested with a small smile. "Unsettling," Philip corrected him. "I'm not sure how to feel about it." As the day of the performance drew near, Philip found himself torn between conflicting emotions. Professional pride made him determined to demonstrate the superiority of human artistry. Yet there was also a growing respect for what Dr. Tanaka and his team had accomplished, and genuine curiosity about how audiences would respond. The night before the performance, Philip couldn't sleep. He paced his hotel room, ran through the concerto in his mind, and questioned his decision to turn a serious musical event into what some were calling a circus act. Had he made a terrible mistake? His phone buzzed with a text message from his daughter. "Dad, just saw your robot rival on the evening news. Don't worry, no machine could ever play with your heart. Can't wait to see the performance tomorrow. Love you." Philip smiled, feeling a weight lift from his shoulders. Whatever happened tomorrow, whatever Mira 7 could or couldn't do, there was something about music, about all art, that went beyond technical skill. It was about connection, about shared human experience. He went to the window and looked out at the lights of Vienna, the city of Mozart and Beethoven. Tomorrow would bring what it would bring. The stage was set, the challenge accepted, and soon they would all discover whether a machine could truly make music, or merely play notes. The day of the performance arrived with a buzz of excitement that could be felt throughout Vienna. The International Piano Festival had never seen anything like this before. Outside the historic concert hall, a line wrapped around the block. People who couldn't get tickets had gathered just to be near the action. News vans with satellite dishes parked along the street, and reporters did live segments for the evening broadcasts. Inside, Philip paced backstage, adjusting his bow tie for the third time. Through a small monitor, he could see the audience filing in, a mix of classical music enthusiasts in formal attire, curious technology fans with their phones already out, and critics with notepads at the ready. The usual quiet murmur of a pre-concert crowd was replaced by animated discussions, and an energy that felt more like a sporting event than a piano recital. Mrs. Kowalski, the festival director, approached him with a tight smile. "The hall is completely full. We've had to turn away at least 100 people." "I didn't expect all this," Philip admitted. "Nor did I," she replied. Her expression softened slightly. "But I must admit, you've brought new attention to the festival. We've never had this many young people in the audience before. In a separate room nearby, Dr. Tanaka and his team were making final adjustments to Mira 7. The robot sat motionless, its metallic frame gleaming under the bright lights. Unlike Philip, it showed no signs of pre-performance nerves. "Are you ready?" Philip asked when he stopped by to check on them. Dr. Tanaka looked up from his laptop. "Mira 7 is prepared. We've done everything we can." He hesitated before adding, "No matter what happens tonight, thank you for this opportunity. Few people take AI and robotics in the arts seriously. You've given us a chance to show what's possible." Philip nodded, not entirely sure how to feel. Part of him still viewed this as a light-hearted experiment, but seeing the dedication of Dr. Tanaka's team had given him a new perspective. For them, this wasn't a joke. It was years of work culminating in tonight's performance. At precisely 8 o'clock, the house lights dimmed. Mrs. Kowalski walked onto the stage to thunderous applause, stronger than any opening night in recent memory. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, "welcome to the 43rd International Piano Festival. Tonight's performance is unconventional, to say the least." This earned a ripple of laughter from the audience. "We will begin with Philip Reyes performing the first movement of Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 3 in D minor. Then, as you may have heard, we will witness something unprecedented, a performance by Mira 7, an advanced robot pianist. Please hold your applause between movements, and we ask that you refrain from photography or recording during the performances." Despite this last request, Philip could see the glow of phone screens throughout the audience as he walked on stage. He took a deep breath, bowed to enthusiastic applause, and sat at the gleaming grand piano. For a moment he closed his eyes, letting the silence wash over him. Then his fingers touched the keys, and the first delicate notes of Rachmaninoff's concerto filled the hall. Philip had played this piece countless times before, but tonight felt different. Perhaps it was the unusual circumstances, or perhaps it was knowing that his performance would be directly compared to a machine's. Whatever the reason, he found himself playing with renewed intensity. His fingers danced across the keys, drawing out melodies that soared and plunged, building complex harmonies that filled the enormous space. The orchestra responded beautifully, matching his energy and passion. As the movement progressed, Philip lost himself in the music, forgetting about the robot, the crowd, the controversy. There was only Rachmaninoff's gorgeous composition and his lifetime of training channeled through his fingertips. When he struck the final chords, the audience erupted in applause despite Mrs. Kowalski's request for silence. Philip rose slightly breathless and bowed. The applause continued, people rising to their feet, some shouting, "Bravo!" As the ovation finally began to subside, Philip addressed the audience. "Thank you all for coming tonight. As you know, we have something unusual planned for the next part of our program. A few weeks ago, I visited the Vienna Technology Exhibition and encountered Mira 7, a robot designed to play piano. What began as a joke has become something more interesting, an exploration of what makes music truly human." He gestured toward the side of the stage. "Please welcome Mira 7 and its creators." Dr. Tanaka and his team wheeled Mira 7 onto the stage, positioning it carefully at the piano. The audience watched in fascinated silence as they made final adjustments. The robot sat perfectly still, its posture unnaturally straight, its metallic hands poised above the keys. Philip stepped back, giving the stage to the machine. Mira 7 will now perform the same movement of Rachmaninoff's concerto. He took a seat in the front row, curious and slightly nervous about what would happen next. Dr. Tanaka gave a signal, and the orchestra began the introduction. The tension in the hall was palpable, everyone waiting to see what would happen when Mira 7 began to play. The moment arrived. Mira 7's hands moved to the keyboard and the first notes emerged, clear, precise, and beautiful. The audience collectively leaned forward, many with looks of surprise on their faces. Whatever they had expected from a robot pianist, this wasn't it. As Mira 7 continued, something extraordinary began to happen. The robot's playing wasn't merely technically accurate. It was expressive. Dynamic shifts came at unexpected moments, creating tension and release. Tempos ebbed and flowed naturally, giving the music a sense of breath and life. Philip watched, fascinated and slightly unsettled. He had expected Mira 7 to play with mechanical perfection, but there was nothing mechanical about this performance. The robot seemed to be responding to the orchestra, adjusting in real time to subtle variations in their playing. Halfway through the movement, Philip glanced around at the audience. The skeptical smiles and curious stares had been replaced by expressions of genuine engagement. People weren't watching a technological novelty anymore. They were listening to music. One woman near Philip had closed her eyes, swaying slightly with the melody. An elderly man across the aisle dabbed at his eyes with a handkerchief. A young couple held hands, their fingers tightening during a particularly moving passage. Philip turned his attention back to Myra 7. The robot's movements had a strange grace to them, economical yet flowing, without any wasted motion. Its fingers struck each key with perfect precision, yet somehow avoided the rigid timing that Philip had expected. There were subtle rubatos, hesitations, emphases that couldn't be explained by programming alone. As the final section of the movement approached, Philip felt a confusing mix of emotions. Professional pride made him want to find flaws in Myra 7's performance, to reassure himself that human artistry remained superior. Yet he was also moved by the beauty of what he was hearing, impressed by what Dr. Tanaka and his team had accomplished. The movement built toward its climax, Myra 7's hands flying across the keyboard with impossible speed yet perfect clarity. The orchestra matched the robot's intensity, creating a wall of sound that filled the concert hall. Then came the final chords, powerful, resonant, and somehow triumphant. When the last note faded, the hall remained completely silent. For several long seconds, no one moved or made a sound. It was as if the audience collectively held its breath, processing what they had just witnessed. Then someone began to clap. Others joined in, and suddenly the entire hall erupted in thunderous applause. People rose to their feet, cheering and applauding with an intensity rarely seen in classical concerts. Some were shaking their heads in disbelief, others were smiling broadly. A few were even crying. Dr. Tanaka stepped forward and bowed deeply. His team members followed suit, their faces showing a mixture of pride and relief. Myra 7 remained motionless at the piano, neither acknowledging nor responding to the ovation. Philip found himself applauding as well. Whatever he had expected from this experiment, it wasn't this. He had intended to demonstrate the limitations of technology, to show that true artistry required human emotion and understanding. Instead, he had witnessed something that challenged his most fundamental beliefs about music and expression. As the applause continued, Philip walked onto the stage and gestured for Dr. Tanaka to join him. Together, they stood before the audience, the human pianist and the creator of the robot pianist, united by their shared love of music, despite approaching it from radically different directions. The ovation lasted for nearly 5 minutes, the longest in the festival's history. When it finally began to subside, Philip stepped forward to the microphone. The audience quieted, eager to hear what he would say after this unprecedented event. "Well," he said with a small smile, "I think we've all learned something tonight." Bright camera flashes greeted Philip as he stepped into the crowded press room. The performance had ended 30 minutes ago, but the building was still buzzing with excitement. Journalists from music magazines, technology publications, and mainstream news outlets packed the small space, all eager to get his reaction to what had just happened on stage. "Mr. Reyes," they called out from every direction.
"How do you feel about Myra 7's performance?"
Philip took a seat at the table, Dr. Tanaka beside him. He took a moment to gather his thoughts, aware that whatever he said would be quoted, analyzed, and debated in the days to come. "I'm surprised," he admitted finally, "and impressed. What Dr. Tanaka and his team have accomplished is remarkable. Myra 7 played with a level of expressiveness I didn't think possible from a machine." "Do you think you were outperformed by a robot?" a reporter called out bluntly. The room fell quiet, waiting for his answer. It was the question on everyone's mind. Had human artistry been surpassed by technology? Philip smiled slightly. "That's not a simple yes or no question. Myra 7 played with perfect technical precision and, yes, with surprising expressiveness. But music isn't a competition. It's a conversation. Between the performer and the composer, between the performer and the audience. I'm not sure a machine, however sophisticated, can truly be part of that conversation in the same way a human can. But the audience's reaction suggests otherwise," another journalist pressed. "People were moved to tears." Dr. Tanaka leaned forward. "If I may," he said quietly, Mira 7 is programmed to analyze and reproduce patterns of expression found in human performances. What you heard tonight was, in a sense, a synthesis of human artistry, the culmination of thousands of performances by great pianists throughout history, distilled into one interpretation. This sparked a flurry of new questions. Was that still art? Was it merely imitation? Did originality matter if the result was beautiful? As the press conference continued, Philip found himself questioning long-held beliefs. He had always seen music as uniquely human, a way to express emotions that words couldn't capture. Yet tonight he had witnessed something that blurred those boundaries. Mira 7 couldn't feel emotions, yet somehow it had evoked them in the audience. When the press conference finally ended, Philip found himself surrounded by fellow musicians who had attended the performance. Their reactions were mixed. Some were dismissive, insisting that the robot's playing was merely a sophisticated trick. Others seemed worried, even threatened by what they had witnessed. "This changes nothing," one pianist said firmly. "A robot can mimic expression, but it can't create from the heart. Doesn't it matter that people couldn't tell the difference?" Another countered. "If the audience feels moved, does it matter where the music comes from?" Later that night, unable to sleep, Philip sat in his hotel room watching the early news coverage of the event. One clip showed audience members leaving the concert hall, their faces still flushed with emotion. "It was incredible," a young woman told the reporter. "I came expecting a gimmick, but I forgot it was a robot playing. I just got lost in the music." "I've been attending classical concerts for 40 years, an elderly man said, "and I've never experienced anything quite like this. It raises profound questions about what we mean by artistry." Philip's phone had been buzzing constantly with messages from colleagues, friends, and family. His daughter had sent a simple text. "Dad, that was mind-blowing. But I still think your playing has something the robots doesn't. A lifetime of human experiences behind each note." That comment stayed with him as he finally drifted off to sleep. The next morning, Philip woke to find that the story had exploded. Robot Pianist was trending on social media. Major newspapers had run front-page articles with headlines like "The Day Music Changed Forever" and "Man versus Machine on the Concert Stage." Video clips from the performance had gone viral, with millions of views already. Over breakfast, Philip read through some of the articles on his tablet. Music critics were divided. Some praised Mira 7's technical brilliance while insisting that it lacked the ineffable human quality that made great performances truly special. Others argued that this represented a watershed moment in the history of music, comparable to the invention of recording technology. One article caught his attention. A respected music philosopher had written a thoughtful piece titled, "What Mira 7 Teaches Us About Human Creativity." The author argued that rather than threatening human artistry, the robot's performance highlighted what made it special. When we listen to a great pianist, we're not just hearing notes being played correctly. We're connecting with another human being's interpretation of the composer's intentions, an interpretation shaped by their unique life experiences, cultural context, and emotional understanding. Mira 7 can mimic these patterns of expression, but cannot generate them from lived experience. What we witnessed was not a machine becoming more human, but rather humans demonstrating our remarkable ability to find emotional resonance even in the output of our technological creations. Philip was still pondering this when there was a knock at his door. It was Dr. Tanaka. "May I come in? I hope I'm not disturbing you." Philip invited him in, and they sat by the window overlooking the Vienna skyline. "I wanted to thank you," Dr. Tanaka said, "for your graciousness last night. Many artists in your position might have been resentful or dismissive." Philip shrugged. "I started this as a joke, remember? If anyone should feel foolish, it's me for underestimating what your team had accomplished." "Not foolish," Dr. Tanaka said. "You asked important questions that we technologists sometimes avoid. What is the purpose of creating machines that can do things humans have traditionally done? Are we trying to replace human creativity or enhance it?" They sat in thoughtful silence for a moment before Dr. Tanaka continued. "I have a proposal for you. My team and I have been discussing a new project, a collaboration between human pianists and AI systems. Not replacing musicians, but creating new possibilities for musical expression. Would you be interested in working with us?" Philip was surprised by his own immediate interest in the idea. Just days ago, he would have dismissed such a proposal outright. Now he found himself intrigued by the possibilities. What exactly did you have in mind? We're calling it duet, a system that learns from a musician's playing style and then creates complementary music in real time. Not mimicking, but responding. A true musical conversation between human and machine. Over the next few hours, they discussed possibilities that neither had considered before. Ways that technology might extend human creativity rather than replace it. By the time the Vienna Piano Festival concluded a week later, news of the upcoming collaboration between Philip and Dr. Tanaka's team had generated even more interest than the original performance. Music schools began discussing courses on human-AI musical collaboration. Technology companies reached out with funding offers. Young musicians, rather than feeling threatened, seemed excited by the new creative frontier. 6 months later, Philip found himself on stage again, this time with a smaller, more streamlined version of Mira 7 called Duet. The concert hall was packed, the audience a mix of classical music lovers and technology enthusiasts. But this time there was no competition, no man versus machine narrative. As Philip began to play, Duet listened, analyzed, and responded, not with pre-programmed patterns, but with genuinely new musical ideas that complemented what Philip was creating. Together, they performed a piece that neither could have created alone. During one particularly beautiful passage, Philip glanced out at the audience and saw the same woman who had been moved to tears during Mira 7's performance at the festival. She was smiling now, her eyes closed, swaying slightly to the music. In that moment, Philip realized that what had begun as a joke had become something profound. Not just a technological achievement or a musical experiment, but a new way of thinking about the relationship between humans and the tools we create. He had started this journey believing that the essence of music was something uniquely human, something a machine could never truly capture or create. Now he understood that the boundaries weren't as clear as he had thought. Perhaps what made music special wasn't that it was created by human hands alone, but that it connected us, to each other, to our emotions, to our shared humanity. And perhaps that connection could be forged in new and unexpected ways. As the final notes of the duet faded away, Philip and Duet took a bow together, the famous pianist and the robot no one had heard of a year ago, now partners in exploring the future of music. The audience rose to their feet, their applause filling the hall not with the shock and surprise of the first performance, but with genuine appreciation for what they had just experienced. Not a novelty, but a new art form being born before their eyes. What had started as a famous pianist's joke had become something no one could have predicted, a bridge between human creativity and technological innovation, opening doors to possibilities that neither humans nor machines could have achieved alone.